Hello and welcome to the last day of September. Very glad to have you here. I've got our favorite historian who hasn't joined us in quite some time. It's Kenneth C Davis joined to talk about the history of free speech in America and why banning books is as American as apple pie. That and much more. Great conversation with Kenneth C Davis. If you want to jump to that interview, you can. Skip ahead. It begins at about 34 minutes in today. But before that, like I do almost every weekday, I've got your headlines and a clip show for you. Can't do it without your support. Thank you very much for subscribing. Got some new subscribers this week. It's been great lately, and I cannot thank you enough. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic is the place to go. Looks like I'll be live with Wajad Ali today at 3 p.m. on Substack and everywhere else. And I think that's all I need to tell you. Let's get to those headlines and clips.
It's Pete's Headlines and Clip Show. Get in on the shit show.
All right, several big stories driving yesterday. You had our Mad King rambling and making all kinds of pronouncements in the White House yesterday with the leader of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu. Really bizarre press conference. They didn't take any questions. They announced this kind of peace plan that Israel and the U.S. are going to agree to, but there's probably no chance that the Hamas will agree to it and everything that's in it. So it looks like there's going to be a lot more death and destruction, if I had to guess. But that was just one thing that happened yesterday. The other big story, of course, is that a government shutdown fast approaching. That could happen tomorrow night. The top congressional leaders of both parties went to the White House and put on a show of acting like they were going to discuss something when we all pretty much know that the meeting would yield no progress, and apparently it did. And everybody on the left seems to be pretty pissed off about the leadership of the Democratic Party. Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, who were both there yesterday, got a clip of Jennifer Welch, who's a very influential liberal commentator, ripping both them. After the meeting, leaders from both parties blamed their opponents for being uncompromising. And, of course, Democrats are demanding an extension of Obamacare subsidies and money for other health care programs. Republicans have flatly rejected it. But without Democratic support, Senate Republicans don't have the votes to advance a bill to keep the government open. So they're going to be blamed for it. They have the majorities. They should be blamed for it, but we'll see what happens. And it's going to be different this time. And I'm worried about all of our federal workers and everybody, including myself, who is dependent on all different types of programs, agencies, and, of course, the insurance rates that could go up. So, yeah, big deal. Those are the two big stories from yesterday. I think pretty much led the day. Some of the other stories I've gathered for you. Yesterday, we had this anti-environmental regime outlining a coordinated plan to assist the coal industry, which is almost dead. Like, more people work at your local dentist's office than in the coal industry. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but bad news. And I'll get a clip from the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, coming up just talking about it. It's just such nonsense. And, of course, you heard about this shooting at the Mormon church probably in Michigan. That was a fairly high-profile shooting, pretty horrible, horrific crime. 8 people were wounded. Apparently 4 people were killed. But you might not have heard about Sunday's other mass shooting where police have arrested a suspect in North Carolina at a bar, left 3 people dead, 8 others injured. This guy is accused of opening fire from his boat. So he's out on the water, and he starts shooting into this riverside bar called the American Fish Company in Southport, North Carolina, around 9:30 p.m., and then he takes off. Well, they got him, but just 2 mass shootings yesterday, Sunday alone. So that is pretty horrific. Want to mention in Moldova, they had elections, and it's a setback for Russia, for Moscow. Moldova's pro-European party won a victory after a nail-biting election played by Russian interference. Preliminary results apparently on Monday showing allowing it to retain its majority in parliament after what many observers have called the most important campaign in the nation's recent history. So I thought that was pretty important. Yesterday, our Mad King made 2 unilateral tariff announcements on a whim. Part 1 was when he said he would impose a 100% tariff on foreign-made films and slap substantial tariffs on any country that does not make furniture in the United States. Okay, his statements left a lot of key questions about that plan. And the other one was that he said he would impose a 100% tariff on all films produced overseas that are then sent into the U.S. repeating the threat made in May that he would upend Hollywood's global business model. The step signals Trump's willingness to extend protectionist trade policies into cultural industries, raising uncertainty for studios that depend heavily on cross-border co-productions and international box office revenue. So who knows if he's able to follow through with that or not. In Venezuela, U.S. military officials are drawing up options to target drug traffickers inside the country. Strikes within that country's borders could potentially begin in a matter of weeks, escalating the conflict. And that would, I think, qualify as starting a war, right? Yeah, I don't know. Some National Weather Service staffers are working double shifts to keep forecasting offices open. Others are operating under a, quote, buddy system in which adjacent offices help monitor severe weather in understaffed regions. Still others are jettisoning services deemed not absolutely necessary, such as making presentations to school children and the like, just important educational opportunities that keep them enriched. All right. Well, also should mention that about 58 million pounds of corn dogs have been recalled because there may be pieces of wood in the batter. So if you have any corn dogs, maybe you should check the brand, I should mention. The NFL's pick of Puerto Rican superstar Bad Bunny to headline the 2026 Super Bowl halftime show has ignited fury among MAGA commentators who fumed that the artist, vocal critic of the administration's deportation drive, is a Trump hater. Three-time Grammy winner, whose real name is Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, will headline the show February 8th. That's when the Super Bowl is at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California. It was announced yesterday, and I got a hilarious bit. It's J.L. Covan's Trump impression talking about this. You know what? That's where we'll start with the clip show right now with a laugh, and we'll end with one too. But here is J.L. Covan's Trump responding to the news that the NFL has picked Bad Bunny. This is one of the best, and they're always great.
So it was just brought to my attention in an urgent briefing that the Super Bowl, which is of course a very sacred tradition in our country, probably the most watched thing on TV, except for when I speak, of course. But I was just informed that in one of the most offensive and radical left and anti-Christian, also, don't forget that, moments in our country, the halftime show of our next Super Bowl will be done by I can't believe I'm saying this, Bad Bunny, okay? Now, what I've been told, we have intel briefings. This is a person from the Mexican city of Puerto Rico, okay? And already I have a problem with that, okay? It's the American Super Bowl where we crown a world champion. And to have somebody from the Mexican province or town or whatever of Puerto Rico, which has produced some, there's been some good things from Puerto Rico. We're friends. We're sort of allies, I think, with Puerto Rico. But this is going too far. This is sort of a desecration of our sacred traditions. And not to mention, we already have a bunny in America, and he's called the Easter Bunny. And the Easter Bunny is a good bunny, okay? Not a bad bunny. He's actually, some people even think he might be the greatest bunny. They call him a goat bunny, which sounds like a scientist put together like a rabbit and a goat in terms of like the things they're doing with science. When they put these species together, they make all sorts of crazy things we're trying to put down. We're trying to stop this kind of horrible science, but it's goat meaning greatest of, the goat. In terms of bunnies, is the Easter Bunny because he is a pro-Christian bunny. He's probably the most Christian. He might be the most religious of all the animals, to be honest. But he also has fun. He brings chocolate. So he's a good bunny in terms of Christian, also a good bunny in terms of chocolate, okay? And now all of a sudden, on a Super Bowl Sunday, a day of American pride and Christian stuff, because it's a Sunday, you are doing a Bad Bunny from Puerto Rico, Mexico. So I don't think the radical left could do anything more horrible, more woke, more destructive to a judo Christian, like all our martial arts, the judo Christian martial arts. There's never been anything more disgraceful. So we say no to Bad Bunny. Thank you.
Oh, so very good. That one is getting a lot of attention across all the platforms that JL has posted it on. All right. Also yesterday, J.B. Pritzker blasted this plan for the National Guard deployment in Chicago. Illinois officials across the board condemned the, quote, militarized force as unconstitutional, politically motivated. And I got 3 clips for you from J.B. Pritzker's very powerful press conference, his commentary yesterday. I want to share them with you. Let's start with this one.
60% of the individuals that ICE has taken in Illinois this year have no criminal convictions of any kind. ICE is running around the loop harassing people for not being white. Just a year ago, that was illegal in the United States. Now, ICE is making it commonplace. That's not making America great. In any other country, if federal agents fired upon journalists and protesters when unprovoked, what would we call it? If federal agents marched down busy streets, harassing civilians and demanding their papers, what would we say? I don't think we'd have any trouble calling it what it is: authoritarianism. So let's not pretend it's something else when it happens in our American cities. The MAGA Republican-supported invasion of Portland and Chicago and LA and Washington, D.C. is not making us any safer. Instead, it is putting our people in danger. This is an attack on neighborhoods, on lawful residents, on U.S. citizens. That's not preventing crime, as Donald Trump claims. That's threatening public safety.
Did you see that video that went absolutely viral of all those ICE agents trying to chase down the cycling, like the delivery guy on the bike? It's amazing. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I shared it everywhere, and they put hilarious music to it. The Benny Hill soundtrack is great. All right, here's more from J.B. Pritzker yesterday, the governor of Illinois.
We'll continue to fight this with everything that we have. So people of Illinois, we need your help. Get out your cell phones. Record and narrate what you see. Put it on social media. Peacefully ask for badge numbers and identification. Speak up for your neighbors. We need to let the world know that this is happening and that we won't stand for it. I was surprised and pleased to see that a federal agent in New York was put on leave after he was caught throwing a woman to the ground. Good. Good. That would never have happened, though, if it wasn't on camera. So keep documenting. It could make a world of difference for someone, perhaps for all of us.
There you go, J.B. Pritzker. And you know what? Let me give you one more. I thought it was really powerful.
But as I've said many times, for Donald Trump and the MAGAs in Congress, this is not about fighting crime or about public safety. This is about sowing fear and intimidation and division among Americans. It was about creating a pretext to send armed military troops into our communities. This is about consolidating power in Donald Trump's hands. What he plans to do with that power, now or during the 2026 elections, should worry all of us. When you add to that the Trump administration's effort to label as dangerous free speech critical of him, White House senior staff calling the Democratic Party fascist, the Trump-appointed FCC chair threatening to revoke broadcast licenses and the approval of a merger in order to silence late-night comedians, Trump's threats to jail political opponents. You cannot call this anything except an attack on the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah, there you go. Very powerful stuff from J.B. Pritzker. I like that guy. He's doing a really good job at telling us exactly what is happening, explaining it very well, and preempting the president and the fascist plans. I like how we call them MAGAs. All right, now here is also a pretty interesting smart guy. He's the Attorney General of Oregon because, of course, they sent federal troops into, quote, war-ravaged Portland. It's been pretty funny watching all the memes and pictures coming out of Portland and people just going about their day. I saw a picture of someone took of just a bunch of deer in a yard, just chilling. Anyway, this guy's name is Dan Rayfield. He's the Attorney General in Oregon. He makes a lot of sense, and he's not backing down.
A hallmark of the current president is he just says things. He says absurd things that aren't based in reality. You got to remember, this is a guy who wants to take a national park, Alcatraz, and turn it back into a prison. These are the type of absurd things that come out of his mouth. And it's just as absurd with war-torn Portland, which feels more inflammatory than it does helpful. I think the thing we should all ground ourselves in is that we all want public safety in our communities. And we have that here in Oregon. We have the Portland Police. We have a district attorney. We have the Oregon State Police that are keeping our communities safe. And if you really want public safety, you wouldn't threaten to send in the United States military into any city in the United States. What you do is you pick up the phone and you would work towards collaboration and finding out what are the appropriate resources that any community needs. And I know for a fact in talking to cities across Oregon and frankly across this country that if you picked up the phone and you asked, hey, what do you need? What could be helpful? It wouldn't be the United States military. That's for darn sure. And so you've had this situation where he's threatening to send in the military into Portland in a way that's not helpful. It's not going to achieve outcomes. It will score in political points, of course, but it's not going to be achieved at anything that we as citizens here in Oregon or in the United States are really looking to achieve.
Yeah, that guy's very good. Dan Rayfield, he is the Attorney General there in Oregon. And now let's go to this very influential liberal commentator, Jennifer Welch, just tearing Democratic leadership over them not being able to take any initiative and control over this government shutdown fight, I guess.
Absolute suicide. You're so incredibly out of touch. Play Chuck Schumer.
I would hope, Kristen.
This is the suicide of the Democratic Party. Absolute suicide. You're so incredibly out of touch. Play Chuck Schumer.
I would hope, Kristen, that some of our Republican colleagues, seeing I know they're loyal to Trump and does whatever he wants, but this is so far stepping over the line that I'd hope some of them would join us in legislation.
This is impotent leadership. It is dangerous leadership. I cannot believe we have these two beta males at the helm of the Democratic Party. Play this final clip of Hakeem.
We hope and expect that Republicans will do the right thing.
And it feels like the Democratic leadership is colluding with them on it because I cannot understand this impotent, out of touch, lackluster leadership. It's so maddening.
Yeah, it is. Well done. I think that's pretty right on. I think she's got her fingers on the pulse of a lot of people who are progressive, who want to see Democrats stand up against Trump and get something done. And these two leaders are not the ones we've been waiting for. All right. I thought this was really great. Might have seen this yesterday. This is Ta-Nehisi Coates talking to Ezra Klein on his podcast about Charlie Kirk. He, as always, chooses his words wisely, and I like his words.
I don't take any joy in saying this, but we sometimes soothe ourselves by pointing out that love, acceptance, warmth, that these are powerful forces. I believe they are. I also believe hate is a powerful force. I believe it's a powerful, powerful unifying force. And I think Charlie Kirk was a hate monger. You know, I really need to say this over and over again. I have a politic that rejects violence, that rejects political violence. I take no joy in the killing of anyone, no matter what they said. But if you ask me what the truth of his life was, you know, and the truth of his public life, I would have to tell you it's hate. I would tell you I'd have to tell you it is the usage of hate and the harnessing of hate towards political ends.
Yeah, very well said. Oh, so well said. That's why the clip show is so integral. I love finding these clips and hearing these views and sharing them with you, and I know that you do as well. And here is another good one. This is Jessica Tarlov, the only liberal on the panel over at the 5, holding it down as always. And she's talking about this Michigan shooter and how the right is completely ignoring the fact that he's a Trump supporter or just that it even happened and making it sound like it was anti-Christian, even though he himself apparently was a Christian. We still don't know exactly the motives, but we do know that Trump and Kash Patel and the rest would have made this out to be every Democrat if they had any nugget of information that would lead them that way.
Secretary did as well was this chart that Axios published about this rise in the conversation that Fetterman was having with Maria and something that he posted on Twitter, which the Deputy White House Press Secretary did as well, was this chart that Axios published about this rise in left-wing violence. And the right was gleefully tweeting it, ignoring the fact that the right-wing violence was much larger than the left-wing violence, which is the truth about it. And you can go anywhere you want for these statistics. You can go to Cato. You can go to the Government Accountability Office. You can go to the Center for, Strategic and International Studies to see that. And in the wake of the absolutely tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, the right, led by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, wants to make it out as if the left are the only ones who have ever used the word fascist. And you can see a compilation of Stephen Miller saying it. It's passing all over Twitter. You have Donald Trump on tape. You have analyses of how many times that he's referred to Democrats and journalists as evil just in the first 6 months of his administration. And, I think that we should have led this conversation with the tragedies of this weekend. We had more mass shootings, which is just the daily occurrence in American life. And Kash Patel, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump, Caroline Levin as well, out there with a very different narrative than I would think that they would have, but because it doesn't add up for them. The guy who drove up to the Mormon church, set the place on fire, killed 5 people, shooting them, was a Trump supporter. He had a Trump Vance flag in his backyard, which some on the right are trying to say that it said stop Trump. Doesn't make any sense. And if a leftist or someone had killed someone and had a dark Brandon flag or a Biden-Harris flag, you don't think that Kash Patel, that would have been the first thing that he would have said?
Yeah, because the right is going everywhere saying, go after the Mormon people. There's a difference. There's a difference when there's one person, a one-off, and people that are going on the day-to-day basis. It's not a one-off. Go back to the Axios chart, and you can see how much of a not one-off it is. The hypocrisy is astounding. If you want to have a message of tolerance and let's get these people the mental health they need, because he needed mental help, so did the guy in North Carolina who killed 3 people at that waterfront bar, a veteran, people who we ignore and don't treat. People said warning signs for decades that had been ignored. Make that your message no matter who's killing people. But when the shoe is on the other foot and you can't demonize the left for this one, they say nothing. Nothing. Oh, it was just about anti-Christian bias. It was a Christian, by the way, killing other Christians.
All right. Yeah, he had nothing to say. Nobody had anything to say there. Huh. Interesting. All right. Speaking of Fox, let's go to Fox Business and listen to this report about the price of steak. Even Stuart Varney, that British loser. You ever see this guy? He's a real son of a bitch. But every once in a while he says something that's true and makes sense, because even he can't sell out 1,000% of the time.
Kelly, beef prices are higher. I got that. How much more are we actually paying?
Yeah, you're really going to be treating yourself at the grocery store, Stu. Take a look at this. For ground beef, prices are up about 14% year over year, or I should say 13%, I believe. Roasts, 14%. Steaks, 17%.
Kelly?
Oh, no. Roasts are up 14%. Wow. I wonder what MAGA thinks about the fact that steak prices have gone up 15, 20% since he took over. Man, I bet they wouldn't have voted for him if they knew how much meat was going to cost. They love meat. As like a cultural thing. It's very manly, It's so stupid. Okay, let's move on to Jake Tapper over at CNN, fact-checking our Mad King, who's just pumping out fake news all the time. This time about a magical bed. He posted about a magical bed.
President Trump promoted a new cure-all bed for U.S. hospitals this past weekend. It seemed way too good to be true because, of course, it was not true. Not anything about it was true.
President Donald J. Trump has announced a historic new healthcare system the launch of America's first medbed hospitals and a national medbed card for every citizen.
Every American will soon receive their own medbed card. With it, you'll have guaranteed access to our new hospitals led by the top doctors in the nation.
None of that was real. That was all AI. The Laura Trump was AI. The Trump was AI. It's false. Trump did delete the post later. The White House has not commented on it.
That's fucking nuts. It's just absolutely duck and futz. See what I did? I mean, I can't believe it. I just can't believe that he put that out there is so bad. It's so bad. All right, well, here's something good. No, wait. Oh, this is also bad. Oh, no, this is the Secretary of Energy, who's a real dope. His name is Chris Wright. And he's on Fox yesterday with Maria Barta-Stupid talking about how important their investment in coal is. This is really triggering. Bothered me a lot when I first saw this news, and even more when I heard this dipshit.
Breaking news for us this morning. Tell us.
Yes, Maria, we're announcing today expanded programs to help the American coal industry. And we're helping it just because for years it's been under assault. It was out of fashion with the Chardonnay set in San Francisco, Boulder, Colorado, and New York City, where I just was at Climate Week. But it's critical to America's industrial might, not just for electricity, as you mentioned. It's our third largest source of electricity after natural gas and nuclear. But we also use it. It's the backbone of steel production. It's critical for cement production. Coal just makes the world go round, and they've tried to strangle it, particularly the Biden administration, starting with the Obama administration. But we need the coal industry. We're stopping the strangulation. We're going to provide some funding to upgrade existing coal plants, keep them open, even add some pollution controls so they run cleaner and better. But coal's got a long future. As long as the lives of anyone alive today, let's stop pretending it's going away, or stop wishing it was going away. It's critical to our country.
Ooh, do I not like that guy. Coal just makes the world go round. Oh, man. I hope he gets to... They should send that guy down into a mine. Give him a look-see. All right. Now, is MAGA Nation turning against Trump over the Epstein files? I don't know. Steve Bannon lost control of this live event he was hosting yesterday where one of the guys said yes. Listen to this nonsense. This is what it sounds like over there on Earth 2.
You would actually tell Trump you don't know, you question who rules this country?
I definitely would, because it's a blackmail ring, and anybody who wouldn't is not paying attention. Simply put, Epstein himself said that he was best friends on the stand with Donald Trump. So anybody who thought that these files were going to get just declassified because we pressured him enough or you voted harder enough is just lying to yourself, frankly.
Do you agree with a special prosecutor has to be an independent special prosecutor has to take over? Do you believe that DOJ and FBI right now, with the guys who are all close to, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, do you think they have any credibility left to pursue this?
No, and I'll tell you exactly why, Steve, because in 2016, we trusted the plan with Trump, but now Trump has become the deep state. The exact thing we voted him in.
Why do you say he's become the deep state?
What is more deep state than covering up for pedophiles? Why would you go to that island? Why? Tell me, why would you go to that island? Why would you go on the plane? Why his top donors? Sorry. Okay. Why are his top donors neighbors?
Anybody agree with that? Are we going to lose part of the base if we don't? Burkhorn, are we going to lose part of the base if we don't?
Oh, how about that? Well, I thought that went well. I thought that was great. Sorry about that. Sorry I shared that with you. Here's something that makes you feel a little bit better. Maybe a little bit. It's not great, but this is Pete Buttigieg at the Center for American Progress liberal think tank annual or event gathering that they were hosting. I
did not come here to tell everybody that things are better than they look. They're not. They're probably going to get worse before they get better. And yet I'm optimistic. Not because things are better than they look, but because things have reached the point where we will have to fashion something entirely new. We will have to do it on the day, and it will come when Donald Trump is no longer politically active in the United States, which will happen. But also, in order to be prepared for that day, and I would argue in order to hasten that day, we better paint that picture now. for ourselves and then through good storytelling for everybody else. And that means we need to avoid the appearance or the reality of being committed to retrieving some prior status quo, which is very hard. We are horrified by watching all of these things being demolished around us, institutions, departments, norms. And by the way, it is criminally wrong to have demolished them. I'm thinking of things like the U.S. Agency for International Development or our Department of Education, but also, of course, international frameworks. It is criminally wrong to demolish them, but nobody on a clean sheet would design them the way they were in 2024. And we shouldn't try. Our job is not to go around picking up the shards of what there was and trying to tape them back together like they were. Just like it would not have worked in my city way back when to go around saying we were going to put it back the way it was. To say I didn't go around saying we were going to make South Bend great again, right? We have an opportunity and an obligation to develop something new. And to me, that is propulsion. Propulsion rather than paralysis, precisely because of the proportions of what we're up against.
What the hell? You're writing a goddamn haiku? The illiteracy there was very impressive. The whole thing was, I like people to judge. Makes a lot of sense. It's a good communicator. We could use more of them. All right, time for some comedy. Let's get to Seth Meyers last night with his Closer Look segment.
If you're on social media at all, you know that AI slop is everywhere, and we all have to watch out for it. I can't tell you the number of times I've had an Instagram model slide into my DMs, only to later find out she's AI. The most recent example was Svetlana. She messaged me and said, "Hi, cutie," and I said, "Hey there, are you a fan of late night comedy?" And she said, "What's your social security number?" And I said, "Ooh, I love when you play hard to get." And then I gave it to her, and long story short, I'm poor now, but hey, it happens to all of us. We're all susceptible to hoaxes and scams, like this gullible young man.
President Trump shares what is apparently an AI video of himself promoting fake medical technology.
It features a rendering of the president speaking. You hear a version of his voice, and it's supposed to resemble a Fox News segment featuring his daughter-in-law, Lara Trump. So presumably the president knows he never actually uttered these words.
Does he? I would not assume that. Trump seems like the kind of guy who would watch an AI video of himself and then demand his staff explain why they didn't tell him about the thing he obviously already knows about. Do you know how embarrassing it is when I have to hear it from me? I mean, I'm not sure he's aware of any of the words he's saying as he's saying them. Like last week when he called a press conference to push a false link between autism and acetaminophen, and when he got to that word in his script, he reacted to it like he accidentally wandered into the international section at the supermarket.
I said, well, let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen.
You called the press conference. There wasn't a meeting beforehand where you at least heard the word? I mean, whenever there's a word that long in a Closer Look, we have an all-hands-on-deck meeting where they say it to me, and then I say it back, and then they say it again, and then we change it to something easier. I also love how Trump has no filter. He can't even hide the fact that he's never seen it before. He just sounds it out loud in front of the cameras. It's like watching a baseball player walk up to the plate and say, "Okay, now let's see, what do we do with this big wooden stick?" Which would never happen, of course, unless, you're at a Mets game. You guys...
Too soon, Seth. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, well, I got the show done before Colbert and Kimmel from Brooklyn were on, so that's all I've got for you. But it's now time to get to my conversation with the great Kenneth C Davis. If you don't have his books, you got to get them. Go get all of them. Don'tKnowMuch.com. Of course, he's a best-selling author, my favorite historian. For more than 30 years, he has been writing these books, busting myths, setting the record straight, and making history human. I love him. You love him. We caught up yesterday to talk about the history of censorship and free speech and banned books. It's Banned Book Week next week. And so I hope you like this. You can watch it at youtube.com/standupwithpete. While you're there, subscribe and like that channel. There's potential way for me to make money just by getting likes and subscribers and views, of course, over there as well. So check it out there, and I hope you like it here. Let's do it right now. Look who it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's been way too long since we talked to my favorite historian, and no time is better than any time. Kenneth C Davis, welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me.
Always a pleasure, Pete. We've been talking to each other for a very, very long time, but there is no time like the present. So I'm glad to be with you again. As I just said to you before we went live, these are the times that try men's souls, as Thomas Paine wrote 250 years ago. And so we're all thinking about how to respond to the times that try men's souls.
And one of the best ways to do that is to know what men's souls and women's souls and human souls have experienced in the past in terms of any kind of adversity. I think it's helpful to know personally and for your own journey, but certainly in your country and what your countrymen's souls have dealt with. And so when we're talking about the history of authoritarianism and fascism, no one knows more about this than you as well, because you wrote a whole book about strongmen. And I feel like I want you to just frame where you think we are at as it compares to regimes in history, because I do think that we often make mistakes trying to compare too much. What we're dealing with now is new on its own, it feels like.
Well, it's certainly new here in this country, but history is a very harsh teacher. History, as probably one of your favorites, one of my favorites, Timothy Snyder says, history does not repeat, but it does instruct. And so this is the time when we need to first be instructed by history and then take our orders. You know, what then do we do about it? I have been writing about and talking about American history for more than 30 years now. Hard to believe that Don't Know Much About History came out in 1990. It's hard to believe that I am, that 30 years has gone by and 35 years has gone past in my life. And I've spent most of those 35 years trying to tell people this stuff is really important. It's really interesting. It has everything to do with our lives today, but it's not that boring stuff you got back in high school. We have to talk about history as real people doing real things, and not just dates, battle speeches, legislation, Supreme Court decisions. All of those things are important, but they're not the things that history really is, which is how human beings respond to the moment that they're in. So we are in a moment. I wrote to you a couple of days ago saying, Banned Books Week is coming, and I talk about it. I've been talking about it every year, I guess, since 1984 or so when it started. And it always is sort of this, oh, wow, this is a really important thing. But now it's more than important. It's really, we are in the moment where all of the worst nightmares that so many of us have had, writers, historians, academics, people who pay attention to this stuff, because we are not just seeing, a handful of books by a handful of writers disappearing, but we're seeing whole libraries being diminished at the behest of an administration. We're seeing lists of books being removed from the service academies, West Point, and Annapolis. Yeah. We're seeing teachers and professors either being forced out or told that they can't teach certain things. And then you also have, on the more symbolic but very important side, you have these army bases being renamed, being given the names of former Confederate heroes under the guise that, it's not really being named in their honor. It's just this, kind of phony thing. We have a portrait of Robert E. Lee being restored to the library at West Point. And you could say, well, it's a picture of a guy who was the superintendent of West Point. But the real matter is that Robert E. Lee was a traitor to the country. He betrayed his oath of office to the United States Army and commanded men and was responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands, perhaps, of American Union soldiers. So it's not I think, a thing to be taken lightly, that these people are being restored to a place of honor. And then you do have this massive expunging of books from libraries, placards from historical museums, explanatory notes at national parks are being erased. So it's more, this Banned Books Week this year is more about a handful of books or 10 books or 20 books being removed. It's really about a concerted effort to control what we read, what we teach, and that means what we think. And it's so dangerous to me as a person who's studied this for a long time.
What we read, what we teach, what we think, also what we see. You mentioned the museums and some of these photographs and plaques being removed. It's also, you mentioned the celebration of Confederate soldiers who were traitors. So we're celebrating the traitors and we're erasing the horrible things that those traitors did at the same time. And I often think about you because sometimes we live through history and watch it be rewritten. And I can think of any number of issues, but I feel like one of the most prominent ones is what happened on January 6th when everybody across the country watched on television in insurrection or whatever they wanted to call it. But they watched it. They watched what happened. We all knew what was happening. And this administration and many in the media have tried to rewrite that. Just yesterday, they were talking about trying to rewriting that in terms of how many FBI agents, there was some conspiracy, were in the crowd. What does it mean when a country decides to ban photographs, ban books, ban plaques? Where have we seen that?
Well, of course, this is the essence of what propaganda is and means. It's controlling the narrative, and you certainly rewrite history to fit your own narrative. You take the history of the past and either eliminate the parts that you don't like, to highlight the parts that you think celebrate what you want to celebrate. It's very difficult for me as a historian who's watched the changes and the transformation of how we thought about race and the Civil War in this country over the last 50 years, and that we'd really made this tremendous leap forward of a much broader understanding of what the Civil War was about, certainly a broader understanding of what race and slavery meant in this country's history. And you cannot take race and slavery out of this country's history without making it a completely false narrative. So while we had made so much progress, and I'd like to think, writing the books that I did and talking about these things and writing a book like In the Shadow of Liberty, where I talked about 4 presidents who owned people. They enslaved human beings, and it was completely part of their world. It put the food on their table. It put the clothes on their backs. It gave them their power. It gave them their wealth. You cannot understand those men without understanding that. So we made so much progress in getting the country to acknowledge this, in getting schools to slowly accept that we have to teach this. Certainly the houses and the great historical monuments, Monticello, Jefferson's Monticello, Washington's Mount Vernon, Montpelier, the home of James Monroe, had been way out in front on bringing this narrative of what slavery, enslavement meant at that time to the conversation. That is now being expunged. The idea that we can't talk about slavery because it dishonors our forefathers and it dishonors our heritage is such a phony argument that it's hard to believe we are even having it. But we're having it, and the people who are in charge are dictating the terms right now. So, I rarely quote George W. Bush, but I have a quote from him on the front of my website now, don'tknowmuch.com, that says, "A great nation does not hide its history." And George Bush said that in 2016 when he was there for the dedication of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, this extraordinary jewel in the crown of Washington, D.C. museums on the Mall. George W. Bush said that. He said, we can't hide history and we can't, omit the sins that the country had. So that is what the current realm of propaganda and censorship is absolutely trying to do. And as a writer, as a historian, as most important, as a citizen, I really rebel at this very, very dangerous trend, because it's part of a much bigger trend that I have to say is very clearly authoritarianism. I wrote a book called Strongman about how the strongman has a playbook. And we are seeing that playbook play out in many, many ways now in this country. And to be blind to it is very dangerous. So we're talking about, things that we can see in a museum, or the books that you might read at West Point, or the books that are available to us or our children in their public schools. Those are all important. And we've also seen that it now affects the comedians who are allowed to say certain things on television. And that's, been an extraordinary moment in this. And we'll see if it's, really going to be a stand-up comedian who leads us in this situation.
Yeah, I think I'd love to see Jon Stewart run for president. And I'm serious. It won't happen, but I'd love to see it. Talk to me about the history of censorship in the United States, where you say it's as American as apple pie. How dare you, sir? I mean, take us through the greatest hits of American censorship, or some of the lowlights.
Well, let's remember, 250 years ago, we birthed the country. 11 years later, in 1787, they drafted the Constitution in Philadelphia. And in drafting that Constitution and then amending it, one of the things they put foremost, even though it's our First Amendment, it wasn't actually the first one they proposed. They proposed that there would be no law regarding freedom of speech, the freedom of press, and the freedom of religion. These are, such bedrock ideals that I grew up with and held to. Many people have said to me over the years, or I've heard many people say, voting is the most important right we have. And I say, a lot of countries have the right to vote. Not every country has the right to free speech the way we do in America. And so I've always been pretty much a First Amendment absolutist in that respect, believing that this was such it's wonderful that it is the First Amendment, because it does sort of elevate it to a place of prime importance. But we are seeing it chipped away day by day right now. So even though we did have a First Amendment from the very beginning of the Republic, that protected the freedom of speech. And of course, people like Jefferson and Madison, who were real advocates of free speech, understood how important it was to have the ability to speak. Because once the government tells people what they can and cannot say, you are on the road to despotism. There's no two ways about it. At every step along the way, of course, there were pushbacks to this. So in the kind of the first crisis in American history, a war against with France that doesn't really happen, we get the Alien and Sedition Acts, which under which it becomes illegal to say anything bad about the government, essentially. And there were actually journalists who were arrested. A very famous journalist named James Callender was arrested under the Alien Sedition Act. Thomas Jefferson, who was not the president when it was passed, thought it was one of the worst laws, and eventually it was overturned. It was also a law that really had a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment to it, and so that was the first pushback, and we have to relate this very carefully or very specifically to wartime, because it's most often in wartime that the issue of who should reveal what comes up. Obviously, there are clear cases where a journalist knows something that the Pentagon is planning, or in a war, or what's being planned, and that sort of information is generally honored. Not always, and sometimes it goes both ways. So in the Civil War, this was an issue. There were laws about what the press could publish then, because the technology was changing. The telegraph had come along. There were carrier pigeons, so people could get news much more quickly. There were trains that delivered news. So the speed with which news could be delivered was changing the way people were reading about what was happening in the war, and sometimes they were reading about what was going to happen instead of what had happened. And so that's always been an issue that between the administration and the press. Now, as you know, a couple of days ago, the Pentagon issued new rules that you could not get accreditation to go into the Pentagon as a journalist unless you signed some agreement that you were not going to reveal anything that they didn't tell you could reveal. That's
not how it works.
It's not how it works. Now, there have been, cases where people have revealed things and it's been detrimental. I was reading a little history of this the other day because of that Pentagon ruling. And during World War II, it was actually a congressman who released a report that said, oh, well, our submarines are really doing much better against the Nazis' death charges, because they figured out the Nazis are setting their death charges too low. And that information was published because this was a congressman saying it. And of course, the Nazis read the newspapers too, and they started changing their death charges, and so more submarines were destroyed, with enormous loss of life, of course. So there is always that tension. But on the other hand, you look at the many more examples of how the press did expose what needed to be exposed. In my lifetime, I think, first of all, right away to, Seymour Hersh getting the story of what happened at My Lai in Vietnam. Of course, the publication by the New York Times and later the Washington Post of the Pentagon Papers, which went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the government could not stop the newspapers from publishing the Pentagon Papers, which was essentially a long, detailed, secret document revealing the depth and the involvement of the United States government in affairs in Vietnam. And perhaps even more dramatic in a sense, you have the image of Walter Cronkite, America's most trusted man, without any question, going to Vietnam in 1968 after the Tet Offensive and coming back and saying, we've been lied to. All of this, there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're just around the corner. They're going to fall apart pretty soon. And Cronkite goes to Vietnam, sees it for himself, comes back and makes this report. And Lyndon Johnson is supposed to have said, if I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost the country. And that was true. That was such an extraordinary turning point. So the fact of the matter is that journalists have performed and will continue to perform the most important act that they have, holding the government to account, unless they all start to sign off and agree on doing this and getting access. I'm sure there will be some who will say, I need access to these people. Okay, I'll sign this paper. This is the way that the fascists operated in Italy 100 years ago. They crushed the newspapers that were opposition papers. They made professors sign loyalty oaths. There were, I think, 1,200 university professors in Italy, and they were all asked to sign a loyalty oath to Mussolini and the party and the king. And all but 12 of them did. So this is what you're up against when the regime decides that loyalty to the regime is more important than loyalty to the truth.
I read yesterday, all great points, Ken, but I read yesterday that on August 2nd, 1934, a guy named Adolf Hitler, is that how it's pronounced, demanded that all members of the German armed forces swear a new oath of personal allegiance to him rather than the German nation, which was part of his effort to consolidate power and to make military personally and unconditionally loyal to him as the head of state and supreme commander. I mean, that does not seem to be too far from what we're seeing right now with our Secretary of Defense, who's been renamed Secretary of War. That was once actually the name, as I know because I read your book, but the history of Civil War. But they also seemingly are begging for some kind of a loyalty plea to Donald Trump. And that's, by the way, what he's demanding of all of us. I'm getting 97% bad coverage, or the jokes are 97% about me. That we're not loyal to a president here in the United States, and certainly not in the military. So reading about history's loyalty to leaders, military's loyalty to leaders, it's real. It's upsetting. It upsets me, Ken.
Well, there's much to be upset about. I mean, this is I've been looking, and I voted in 1972 for the first time. Again, I'm aging myself here, dating myself, I suppose. So I've been interested in politics and history all of my life, and certainly from the time I was a teenager in 1968, as the country was going through this extraordinary turmoil back then. The dangers of all of these things were apparent to me then, and they've continued to be. I have to think that, unfortunately, that like a lot of people, I thought we had really gotten past the worst of it. I thought that, moving into this new century with the end of certainly the end of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, the end of apartheid in South Africa, the coming together of the Irish and the British to some degree, that the nation and the world were moving towards more respect for human rights, more respect for democracy. And it lasted about 10 years, of course. That's the time from the fall of the Soviet Union to the time Vladimir Putin takes over in Russia. And I think we can date that as sort of the beginning of the new era of authoritarianism in the world. The dictatorships that had fallen away have been replaced in many places around the country, around the world, forgive me. And I think that through all of that, whether we liked the way the various administrations went about it, the belief was still that the United States was a supporter of democracy around the world and increasing democracy around the world, rather than being an opponent to it. And that is the historic change, I think, that we've experienced in the last 8 to 10 years. That is a true turning point in the image of this country at home and abroad. And so that's what we're contending with. So we're a little bit off the trail of the dangers of censorship, but the dangers of censorship and the control of information and the use of propaganda. These are all elements of the authoritarian.
And I'm glad that
that's why we have to be extremely aware of it and then do something about it.
Absolutely. And people asking in the chat, what can we do about it? You're doing something by supporting my work, go to don'tknowmuch.com and get all of his books because they're all so relevant. And next week is Banned Book Week. And I want to talk to you getting back to that. You've written a lot about literature. Your last 2 books, I believe, Great Short Books and The World in Books, are about all kinds of other writers in literature, some of which obviously were banned over the years in different countries and nations. And I wanted to ask you specifically just about 1984 because it just seems so unbelievably relevant now. You read about the memory hole, which is a part of his book, where they had like a hole in their apartment, right, where they threw all their documents and records and so on. Talk to me a little bit about Orwell, 1984, and the time that we're in and why it's so terrifying, the parallels.
Yeah, it's the memory hole for, I don't want to, this is not a spoiler for anybody who hasn't read 1984. And if you haven't, drop what you're doing and go and read it because it's the most important book of the moment in many respects. The central character in the novel actually works for the Ministry of Information, but his job at the Ministry of Information is to take old pieces of history, news, books, and throw them into a chute where they're incinerated. Because they want to rewrite the history and they don't want that to be around anymore. So it goes down the memory hole. This is the brilliance of George Orwell, who of course also wrote Animal Farm, what you call a fable, a brilliant book which exposes the dangers of Stalinism. We've been talking about Hitler and Mussolini, very much right-wing authoritarians, but Stalin was, of course, one of the most murderous leaders in history, a communist, and he certainly understood the control of information. Famous example of, there would be pictures of generals standing on the balcony at the big military parades that they would have in the Soviet Union. And the generals would be there in one picture. And then a year later, the same picture, those generals would be missing. They had gone down the memory hole. So it really does happen. And it happens in real time. Just as you were talking about January 6th. I mean, I'm in my office where I sat that day and watched it for hours, as we all did. I saw this with my own eyes. And this to me is the most astonishing piece of the election of this man, how people could forget what happened on that day and what was attempted that day, including most especially the representatives from his own party who were in that building and were, as we all know, running for their lives, ducking under benches, grabbing for tear gas masks because they feared for their lives. But they have now fallen into line. And that is the danger here, that who will fall into line? Because if we're all asked to fall into line, what are you going to answer? There are, 3 traditional responses to a bully in school. And I think they apply in many respects to an autocrat as well. You can either be a bystander, just kind of watch it happen. You can be a collaborator and actually join in, or you can be an upstander. And the upstanders are the ones who usually don't do too well, to be honest. A lot of people ask me, well, what happens to most of these dictators? Mussolini was in power from 1922 to 1943. Hitler was in power from approximately 1930 to 1945. It took a world war to get rid of the two of them. Stalin and Mao died in their positions. They ruled forever. So it's once they're in power, it's very, very difficult to get rid of someone like this. Once your rights are gone, it's very difficult to get them back. So that's why it is really important to understand this. Not to say, history is repeating itself, but we have to be instructed by it, as Timothy Snyder said. And I have On Tyranny right here. I know publishers say never talk about anybody else's book when you're on air, but Timothy Snyder has a lot of great advice for us right now. That's his book On Tyranny. In the new book, The World in Books, which is out in paperback in a couple of weeks, I write about these writers who have challenged authority over the years. And I include George Orwell in that because he writes about going to fight in the Spanish Civil War in a wonderful book called Homage to Catalonia. And that experience really is the experience that taught him what he needed to know to write Animal Farm in 1984, that the totalitarian was a threat no matter which side it was coming from, right or left. And so that's why I've included Orwell both in The World in Books and in Great Short Books, because he does speak to this moment very clearly. There's another book I reference in The World in Books, which is called A Chill in the Air. And it's an Italian war diary written by an Anglo-American woman named Iris Arrigo. And she's describing, the war hasn't begun yet. She's describing the year that's leading up to the war and seeing men on the train in their black shirts and their shiny black boots, go walking down and seeing the shops where the signs in the window say, Mussolini ha sempre ragione. I know you have some Italian, Pete. That means Mussolini is always right.
Always right.
And so when you have a country that accepts the idea that this leader is always right, and to go against him to be disloyal is bad for your country, is certainly one of the most dangerous things we confront right now. And
Trump just said that at the UN last week. He's like, I'm always right. He has a hat that said, I think, Trump is always right. It is horrifying how closely this administration is seemingly copying, maybe not without even knowing it, from Stephen Miller. They're comparing Stephen Miller's speeches to like Goebbels, and they're very similar. Obviously, a lot of things that Donald Trump has said over the years, dehumanizing people, calling them vermin, animals, all that. I mean, like, this is not new, and we know what it leads to, and it's very, very bad. And we're in the bad part, I think it's fair to say, in a lot of ways.
We are, I don't think we're neck deep yet, but we're certainly, knee deep, if not thigh deep. And I wish I had easy answers. As I said, the history is not good. If these people do, if such a person does get total control, it's very, very difficult to dislodge them. It took, as I said, a world war to get rid of Hitler and Mussolini. Tens of millions of people dead around the world. So,
and it's also just so difficult to repair the damage that is done to both the faith and trust in government in this case, or arguably all these other institutions. Creating doubt around something like Tylenol, or creating guilt around it being your fault that your child has autism, or questioning vaccine technology, that if people knew anything about history, they would realize that vaccines are a modern miracle, one of the great modern miracles. And you would know that because everybody was dying everywhere forever, all of humanity before them. And So it matters, I think, a lot that we realize so much about history, which you're so good at teaching us and educating us. The last question goes to you. I know I've had you here for like 35 minutes. What else do you want to comment on? I mean, I know it's Banned Books Week, which is kind of ostensibly what we had to talk with you about, but I'm trying to get a whole bunch of questions. We've got to do another interview soon about anything that's happening right now that I think is very similar to what we've seen in the past, from the immigration issue and these mass deportations to the censorship of comedians. And not only has it happened here, and American writers have written about it, but obviously it's happened in foreign countries throughout human history, and you've written about that. What do you want to pick?
Wow. I guess to be mercenary about it, one of the reasons I wrote The World in Books, and the first chapter, the introductory chapter, is about books are weapons in the war of ideas. And I lay out my thinking that we need to read books because they make us think. And one of the essential parts we have to do right now is think for ourselves, and not buy into what we are being told. And so the ability to read and the desire to read is something that a lot of people have lost. And I think one piece of helping to defend our democracy is being a reader and being informed and not just listening to the party line. So that's sort of the argument that I've made in this book, and I single out 52 books that will help you become a person who thinks for yourself about a lot of different things. It's not just about politics. It's not just about history.
Sure.
Some of it is about climate, which, of course, when we're talking about the denial of science, perhaps nothing is more dangerous, although it's not easy to say that, but it may be the most dangerous piece of this is that we are denying the science of climate change, along with the science of vaccines. Look, I'm old enough to remember we got the first polio doses when I was a kid. But I knew people who were on crutches because they had polio. Measles killed people. As a person who wrote about last great pandemic, 1918, before COVID, I understand the history of these people would have done anything humanly possible to stop the what was called the Spanish flu in 1918. But they couldn't because they didn't even know what a virus was then. It was too small to be seen by the microscopes of the time. So if we are into the business now of listening to people who are going to deny science, as people certainly did in 1918, we are really in such a dangerous place that I don't quite know what to do it. So, call your congresspeople. Tell them that you're not happy with what's going on. You have two senators and a representative. Make sure that they're aware that you are not happy with what's going on.
Yeah, make your voice heard and also move your money. So, unsubscribe to a lot of these major media companies that are doing the wrong thing, and subscribe to independent places like here where you get access to someone like the great Kenneth C Davis. That's my selfish plug, but it's also true because we saw what happened with Kimmel being brought back. That was about money. It was always about money, and it matters. It matters that people did something, and we've seen modern boycotts work, which surprised me. I was a little more cynical, but we've seen that. We need, I think, maybe next time we talk about the history of general strikes.
Okay.
Thank you so much for talking to me. I hope everybody goes to your website and buys all of your books, which I am so happy to display prominently on every bookcase that ever is near me. Don'tKnowMuch.com. Get everything. All of them now. And thank you, my friend. So great to see you.
Thank you, Pete. Stay well. Keep the faith.
We'll talk soon. All right, there you go. Kenneth C Davis, don'tknowmuch.com, don'tknowmuch.com. Go get all of his books. Let him know that you heard him here on the show. And always great. Always a great conversation. Always a great read. And I hope you like that. And if you want, watch it on YouTube at youtube.com/standupwithpete. Thank you for supporting me and the show. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. It is ad-free. It is powered by you, my bumblebees. You can always upgrade, edit your pledge more, pay more if you got it. If you're getting a lot out of it, I really appreciate it. And I will talk to you tomorrow or later today around 3 o'clock. You can find me, it should be on Live with Waj. Looking forward to that. And that is it. That's a wrap. John Carroll, take us out. We'll talk to you tomorrow, folks. Thank you.
The devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Can't deny what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be told up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.